because this is going to be, hopefully, a fun and interactive session. So I ask for your indulgence to please take a seat and pay some attention to the front of the room. We have today such a great group of people, and I've worked with each of these over the years, and I think I've got my work cut out for me. So today, Katie's thrown a bit of a curveball, which I find hilariously ironic, because we're all here today at a conference, and this theme of our debate is talking about the problem is overrated. And if that's the case, I think we can all just call it quits, have a drink and get on with our life. But no, we want to engage, and that is central to the philosophy of AFI. So today we've got a group of people that come from a very deep policy background, interconnected because that's agriculture, and more importantly, they've all got passions. Now, I must predicate this on asking everyone to indulge the theory of the great debate, which is this is hypothetical. So our friends here, almost in Orwellian doublespeak, may in fact be purporting a view that they independently hold the opposing view to. But that's all in good spirit and all part of a debate. So I just ask that our tweeters in the room, if there are any, and that includes you, John Ralph, if you are going to make reference to this, just bear in mind that the individuals are hopefully going to be entertaining, provocative, and hopefully get you to challenge your thinking as well about this very notion about the way in which AFI operates, which is a policy exchange and discourse. So, my panel, starting on this side, we have Jen Medway. Jen is currently the Regional Tech Hub Manager, but Jen has been around for as long as I have. In fact, we went to the World Congress of Young Farmers about 20 years ago. That's how old we are. But I've got some stories to tell, and anyone who's interested, come and see me tonight and I'll give you some insight into what we got up to in Argentina in our heyday. Next to her, the fresh-faced Kade Denton. So Kade has recently joined the AFI as one of Katie's young guns. I can use that phrase, can't I, Kade? Yep, you're under 30, excellent. Oh no, you're not, are you? I'm 35. Oh, just on the fringe, but still classified as a young farmer. So Jen and I are actually very jealous. So Kade is our new research manager. He's working really well with the AFI team after 6 weeks on the job. And Kade is one of our debating captains. Now, I've been told to refer to our next team as Mazdog and J-Dog. We have in fact debated the idea whether to just can the whole thing and move to interpretive dance, and Jen Medway has actually offered to give her best interpretation of Ray Gun. And let's face it, it couldn't be any worse. So Jen, you know, maybe if we've got some time to kill, we'll take you up on that kind offer. But Catherine Marriott, Nuffield Schol-ar extraordinaire. Catherine is joining us today as, you know, she really doesn't need any introduction in the world of agriculture. But Maz, great to see you up here. I know you've been diligently travelling the world, doing the hard yards, looking at the application of what has been such a fundamental part of AFI's research relating to ESG and potentially AASF. And I know you like talking, but we're going to have to really try and contain you today because the great debate is all about finding new ways of communicating. So I look forward to what you're going to bring to the debate in a non-verbal way. J-Dog, Justin. So Justin is one of our young guns. J-Dog heralds, I'll let you guess when he stands up and talks. He does have an accent, so given AFI's budget, we're able to tick the box for international speakers by drawing on our own staff, so thank you very much. And it probably reflects our current state that is our headline international speaker today. So without further ado, Justin is actually going to be speaking today. Now, you guys keep swapping this around, and there's a bit of a play on words here. So technically, the question is talking about the problem overrated? And Justin, you're on the affirmative? Excellent. Yes, it's all very, very mixed up. But you've each got 10 minutes. You've assured me that you've prepared. That's why Catherine Marriott was sitting there penning out some notes about 5 minutes ago. You're going to speak for 10 minutes. I'm going to ring the bell in case you run over time, and then we're going to pause, reflect, and then I'm going to hand it over to you guys to interrogate at will our wonderful panel. But without further ado, our first speaker, J-Dog.
Good afternoon, everybody. Happy to be representing the international community up here. I hope this will be a bit of fun from a contrarian point of view. My teammate and I, we're here to make the case that we do far too much talking and far too little action in this policy community. Now, our opponents would argue that we don't talk enough. But what do they know, right? The Australian agricultural policy community, we discuss and we debate to a fault. And all that talking does not yield equivalent action on the issues that matter. And let me tell you why. So, a bit of evidence first. I think everyone in this room recognizes that there are an extraordinary number of agricultural policy working groups, advisory groups, committees, and so on. I'm guessing that most of the folks in this room, I think that we're all part of a committee at some point that takes hours out of your time over the year. A committee's purpose might be clear, but the output may not be so much. And these formal engagements are really where we spin our wheels on a daily basis, but they're just the tip of the spear, really. There are dozens of conferences, workshops, roundtables. Well, I shouldn't say that at an AFI roundtable. I think we're all here to do some action, right? We attend events to talk about these issues. We, in theory, want to act on them after these events, but how has the needle really moved on some key policy issues that some of us talk about on a daily basis? To give you a concrete example, in AFI's 2004 research agenda, that's right, 2004, 20 years ago, I think it was our first one of the agenda topics was the sector's response to climate change. Now, I know that the policy community has been talking about the sector's response to climate change for a bit longer than that, but that was 20 years ago. It was on our research agenda. And when you look at how much our sector has reduced its total emissions compared to other sectors of the Australian economy, our conversations are comparatively less fruitful. And please excuse me as I commit the sin of giving you numbers and figures without too much context. I know that that's an effective debate tactic. Between 2004 and the most recent reporting year, Australian agriculture has reduced its emissions by about 7%. The rest of the economy has reduced their emissions by 25%. Now, folks will rightfully say that we're growing more food or producing less food for less greenhouse gas emissions, and sure, that's true, but the atmosphere doesn't really care, and the policy topic that we're debating ad nauseum, some of us on a daily basis, is reducing the sector's emissions in total. So why are our conversations less productive than other sectors? And I don't think that anyone in this room wants to talk indefinitely about an issue. I'm biased, but I think that everyone's here at an AFI conference because we want to act, not talk, not to recycle conversations without making any progress. Of course, discussion, it's not inherently bad. It's not counterproductive necessarily. But for issues as complex as the ones that we deal with in agricultural policy, we certainly do need to talk about what the problem is. We know that democracy is debate, right? But there's a limit when too much discussion gets in the way of addressing the very issues that we claim we want to solve. If the agricultural policy community were a reflection of us as individuals, then decision-making would be prompt, choices would be definite, and deliberation would end at some point. But this community does not reflect us as individuals, does it? And despite what some of you who watch politics may think, I believe that our community's affinity for bellyaching and perpetual debate is unique in the world of public policy. And I'll quote AFI's feature article in our September Insights publication with astute observations about our community, which you actually have right in front of you free of charge. We gave it to you at the entrance. The article goes, "We are irritated by people who yak on instead of getting the job done. And yet, we love to admire all angles of a problem before committing to any action. And farmers insist that the public does not value what they do. Yet farming remains one of the most trusted professions in the economy." I think another speaker said that earlier. If you want to read more fine pieces of writing like that, you need to be an AFI member. Katie and Alex, I sure hope you don't mind me making that plug. What's different about our policy community? What's different about Australian agriculture? Why are we so good at spinning our wheels instead of driving off with solutions? So some might say that it's baked into the constituency itself. We represent farmers in the agricultural sector. I think everybody would agree that farmers are a stubborn cohort of society. Well, that's not all about who we represent. It is an instinct to spin our wheels like this. I think there's a why for our endless debates, and I'm going to coin a phrase here that describes that why. As a collective, and importantly not as individuals, because we're all professionals here, we want to do the right thing and get the job done. When we talk too much rather than act, this policy community practices something that I call subconscious obstruction. Obstruction because we prevent progress to solutions with indefinite, inconclusive debate. And subconscious is because we're not explicitly trying to do that individually. Subconscious obstruction means that as a community, we're preventing ourselves from moving forward without realizing as individuals that that's what we're doing. We hamper our own progression with a self-imposed purgatory of conversation. This is particularly egregious when we have the tools right now to solve some of the problems that we're debating. And in many cases, it's not that complicated, especially for them that we have abundant scientific knowledge of something of what's sustainable or what isn't. Importantly, we have known policy tools as well, relatively plenty of capital, and examples from around the world and among our states to improve our environment while delivering positive economic outcomes for individuals, communities, and the marketplace. Subconscious obstruction, it's a plague. It's a plague, y'all, that has stifled meaningful policy approaches. It stalks boardrooms and meetings where issues are talked to death. And worst of all, when you go to your 10th conference of the year on sustainability, maybe more, all of these conversations induce boredom and lethargy in the population. We can cure ourselves of this. We can expel perpetual debates from the veins of this policy community. We can start acting with the platforms that we have that we're lucky to have. And our opponents would argue that we aren't talking enough about our problems or about what really matters to find those solutions. But for those of you who've been in the industry for a while, I want you to think about an achievement that you're really proud of in agricultural policy throughout your career. Think about it and ask yourself a simple question, something that's logical. Could I have had less conversations to get the same thing done? And if so, could I have solved the problem quicker if we just cut the cycle of discussions, unnecessarily analyzing irrelevant nonsense, and actually got to work? Ask yourself those questions. And I'll conclude my section here and let my teammate persuade you probably more convincingly if I were the argument. Thank you for letting me drone on. And when you look at your calendar later, if you're on Outlook, you're staring down the barrel of 20 hours of conferences and 20 hours of meetings, please trust your gut when you think it doesn't have to be this way. Thank you for your attention.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here today to be part of the second annual Australian Farm Institute Great Debate. It's even better to be here on the side of sensibility. Today, my teammate Jen Medway and I are here making the case that talking about the problem isn't overrated. In fact, talking about the problem is one of the most important things that we can do. When I was asked to take part in today's debate, I thought it would be an interesting challenge. Standing up for talking in an industry like agriculture automatically puts us on the back foot. Agriculture is an industry of doers. It's an industry where people like to get their hands dirty. Agriculture is an industry where Kelpie can describe both a farmer's most important tool and, more often than not, their personality type. If you stop a farmer from doing something for too long, they'll start to rip apart the furniture. So Jen and I, we're up against it in today's debate. Nevertheless, we're going to make a clear case, and we're going to make it clear that talking about the problem isn't overrated. It's important to talk about the problem, to keep talking, and ultimately to not stop talking. And what we've already heard from J-Dog, and I'm sure we're going to hear the same from Mazdog when it comes to it, is how we talk too much, how we need to stop spinning our wheels and get on with the job, that talk is cheap, and that it's just time to do something. And that's great. That's a wonderful sentiment. But for all of their bluster, what they're not going to for all of their bluster, they're going to miss a key point. In their rush to get on with the job, they miss the point that it isn't the problem that everyone's obsessed with, it's the solution. Everyone loves to fix things, and I am included in this. I am not casting blame on others. At night, we dream of being the person who has the answer. We long to be the hero, the person who swoops in and saves the day. We love it so much that the solution, the fix, is the only thing we worry about. Solving problems is what gets us up in the morning, and we spend our days creating the solution to all of the world's problems. We fix problems in the shower, we create solutions in the car, and then we tell everyone about it at dinner. Now you might be thinking, that's okay. What's the issue with a solution? A solution can't harm you. And this is the kicker. It's not the solution that gets you, it's the people. In their rush to be the one with the answer, people put the solution before everything else. It doesn't matter the who, the what, the why, or the how. It only matters the solution. After spending their days thinking and crafting and tweaking, people come out of their houses and their offices with a perfect solution. But you can't just leave a perfect solution sitting on a bookshelf or on a desk. How is a solution going to solve a problem when it's locked in a drawer? So what do people do? They go looking. They go looking for a problem to solve with their solution. And it's a funny thing, because these solutions seem to solve a lot of problems, almost in a way you didn't think they could. It's a real coincidence that no matter what your problem is, there's always a solution out there, ready and waiting to go.
I'm going to give you a minute. Okay? Come on, Kate.
Now I admit that sometimes someone has fixed the problem, and it's a genuinely good thing. But for every good solution, there are 10 bad ones. I like to think of the person who first wrapped a banana in plastic to protect the fruit from the outside world. It's a perfect solution to a problem that didn't exist. And just ask yourselves, how many times have you been doing something in a certain way for an unspecified outcome? How many bananas have you unwrapped twice because they needed to be protected? And I can tell you it's because someone with a great solution found a problem that needed to be solved. Did that problem really need to be solved? Was this solution the right approach? Probably not, but that doesn't matter. And this brings me to my key point today. We need to talk about the problem, because when we talk about the problem, we can talk about the right solution. We don't live in a world where problems go unsolved. Someone is going to solve your problem, and you have to live with that solution. Australian agriculture faces some of the biggest issues facing society, whether it's climate change, global supply chains, nature protection. Agriculture faces them all. Importantly, agriculture faces the costs of all of these issues. So when we talk about the problem, it gives us an opportunity to grapple with the nuance, to get into the weeds and truly understand the causes, the effects, and the consequences. And this is important because those solutions don't come free. As the people who are on the front line of both problem and solution, farmers are the ones who wear the cost. And it's important that agriculture as an industry is part of the conversation. Given that I've been given a hurry along, I might skip through some part of these speeches. And I'll end with 2 points. Sometimes the problems are hard, and so the conversations are going to have to be long, and we're going to have to talk a lot. We're likely going to have to repeat ourselves, and yes, that can be annoying, but it's the price we have to pay for the right answer and the right solution that helps us and doesn't get in the way. And so I want to end my speech today sharing an experience that I've had recently, and I'm sure many of you have had a similar experience. Last week, I had the misfortune of being sick, and it meant that I had to spend a couple of days on the lounge watching daytime TV. It was the strangest thing. The TV just seemed to know I had all of these problems in my life. My knives aren't sharp enough, my skin isn't clear enough, my blankets are always slipping off when I'm on the lounge, and my thighs are unshapely. Lucky for me, it just so happens that the TV also had solutions to all of these problems, and I could just buy them right there and then. I don't know how I've lived so long with these problems and without these solutions. We've got a choice today. We can live in a world where we have the hard, boring conversations and come up with the right solutions that work for agriculture. We can show up, we can have the hard, boring conversations about today's problems and tomorrow's solutions. Or we can lay on the lounge and feel sorry for ourselves and have someone's solution forced on us, all for the low cost of 5 monthly installments of $19.99.
Oh my word, the rot that is coming from the other side. I mean, goodness gracious me. I'm sick of, in agriculture, the pontificating, the navel glazing, and yet we don't move the needle, or rarely move the needle, on anything that actually matters. And our previous speakers today pretty much, look, I'm going to be honest, have won the debate for us. Let me give you some examples. David, we get hung up on words and need action. Nikki, we haven't changed much since 2018. We're still talking about the same thing. Sue McCluskey, act yourself. Fiona Simpson, no more groups. We're over talking about it. Richard, we need to start collecting data. It's an action. And Ed, we're talking about the same issues 12 years on. Live trade, water policy, boring. Now, I was going to spend half of my speech debate, like rebutting the opposition, but they've made my job pretty easy for me, honestly. So he's actually admitted ag is an industry of doers. Those very words came out of my seriously fuzzy little opponent over here, word for word. And to talk about... and he talked about problems or solutions and the fact that we need to be talking about solutions, but nothing is going to change unless we actually act on what it is that needs to happen. The solution we need to act, to try different things. I think in society we have a fear of failure, a fear of, oh my gosh, I don't want to do anything because what happens if I make a mistake? And I think fundamentally that is holding agriculture back. And he finished with a wonderful summation of what he saw on television and yet acted very promptly, buying his weighted blanket and his thigh rounding out business. So let me just give you a couple of examples in Australian agriculture as to what issues that we've been talking about, as far as I can see, for far too long. Women in leadership, Indigenous land management, biosecurity, biodiversity, climate change, and my favourite, which is not particularly related to agriculture, although we all eat, is weight loss. Honestly, if I could actually lose weight talking about it, I'd be Elle Macpherson. I haven't managed to move a kilo just yarning. I need to act. So going back to the women in agriculture piece. So unfortunately we lost Dad in 1990 as a kid, and Mum had a number of challenges. We almost lost the farm because back in 1990 a woman could not be a farmer. She was domestic help or whatever. Now, was Mum busy yarning about it and trying to, pull in the army and everything else? No, absolutely not. She had to get really busy really quickly. And as she says in her own words, if I had sat around talking about it for too long, it would have been like rubbing my bum with a brick. It's painful and it's not particularly useful to anybody. If we look at how we've moved the needle for women in agriculture, in leadership, in 1990 to here, we now have 2.3% females CEOs in agribusiness in Australia. So we've been talking about it for 30 years, and have we managed to move the needle? No, not really. You want to see action for women in agriculture, put the woman in leadership and watch the magic happen. I tell you what, there's plenty of examples of that in this room here. Another example is, we talk about waste management and, the government pontificates about all the things we could be doing. Meanwhile, you've got Olympia Yaga, the maggot farmer, who's out there changing the world, working with Woolworths, actually doing it, putting practice change in place. And the Indigenous land management, we've been talking about Indigenous land management for as long as I have been alive, which is 35 years, no, longer. And we know that they have got incredible knowledge to help us manage fire, manage landscapes, manage and enhance waterways and improve our profitability on farm. And yet, do we actually put any of that in place to listen to them? Now, again, an example of action. I'm working at the moment for a company called Yugawalla Pastoral up in the Kimberley, and they work with 7 Indigenous leases. Now, they are building capacity in those people, they are putting infrastructure in place, they're putting training in place. Meanwhile, the government all around them is talking about what we could do to support and bring along Indigenous and Aboriginal landholders. Meanwhile, we've got people actually doing it in the private sector. In the essence of time, I won't go on too much longer, but the same thing applies for biosecurity, biodiversity, Climate change. We first joined the IPCC in 1988 and we're still navel gazing about what we could or possibly ought do to actually put this in place. So in summary, what I want you to think about before I hand over to my esteemed colleague, Jen, is when you look back on your life, who are you going to remember? Are you going to remember the people that acted to change the world or those that sat around yarning about it? Thank you.
I knew going after Catherine Marriott was a bad idea. The circle of trust. Does anyone recognise that line from the early noughties movie, Meet the Fockers? Can I just say that the one person here that doesn't know what I'm talking about is Catherine Marriott. She's never seen the movie. So basically strike everything she said from the record. If you were amongst Kath and you also have not heard about Meet the Fockers, the next 6 minutes are going to be extremely confusing for you as I attempt to convince you that our problem is not overrated. In fact, it's the only thing standing between us and complete and utter chaos. Just ask Gaylord Fokker. And for the record, I am completely nervous about the next 6 minutes and using that correctly, so I'm really hoping I get that right. So if the Fockers taught us anything, it's that when you don't talk about your issue, you end up with a cash in the toilet, a paranoid CIA father-in-law, the word "us-hole" entering the family's vernacular. Esteemed colleagues and fellow debaters, and not Kath Marriott, I am the last leg in this great debate on whether or not talking about the problem is overrated. And spoiler alert, it's not. Let's begin with my first point, the Jack Burns method, i.e. when silence leads to surveillance. So let's start with Jack, the embodiment of avoid the problem until it blows up in your face. Jack is a former agent, so naturally his solution to family issues is to not talk about the problem like a normal person. No, instead he opts for psychological warfare, including setting up secret cameras and hooking poor Greg Fokker up to a lie detector. If Jack had simply come out and said, "Mate, I've got some concerns about you marrying my daughter," perhaps they wouldn't have spent 3 whole movies trying to dig themselves out of an emotional trench. Sometimes it's exactly how we approach policy in our industry. Instead of having frank, open conversations, we keep tightening the rules, adding more and more red tape, installing metaphorical lie detectors, i.e. asking for more and more on-farm data. It's like thinking that you can fix Australia's biosecurity system by levying farmers instead of the groups that create most of the risk. When really all we need to do is engage with people that are on the ground, listen to their challenges and their ideas, and maybe, I don't know, talk it out. My second point focuses on Greg Fokker and who is the master of avoidance and why it always seems to backfire on him. Greg is the king of avoidance and avoiding awkward conversations. In Meet the Parents, he spends most of the movie trying to cover up lie after lie, from accidentally overflowing septic tanks when Jinx flushes the toilets, to knocking over a full urn of Grandma's ashes. Not once did Greg stop and think to himself, maybe I should just come clean and talk about the problem. Instead, he digs himself deeper and deeper until he's got more lies than a politician at election time. Greg Fokker is living proof that avoiding tough conversations is like playing Jenga with dynamite. Sooner or later, someone is going to get hurt. In the ag industry, we see the same thing when policymakers avoid addressing the real issues or when industries spot an issue and metaphorically sweep under the rug. It's the Greg Fokker method, burying the issue, cross your fingers and hope a parrot doesn't repeat your embarrassing secrets to the press. For my 2 cents worth, though, I do feel like industry has certainly shifted away from this classic Greg Fokker move, but we still have a lot of work to do. One of my favourite couples in the movie is Roz and Bernie Fokker. They bring me to my third point, the power of over-communication, but it works. Now, if Jack Burns is the king of covert ops and Greg is the master of avoidance, Roz and Bernie Fokker represent the complete opposite. They talk about everything, whether or not you like it. They talk about intimacy, body functions, and their emotional state at any given moment. Sure, it's uncomfortable. No one needs to hear about Bernie's passion for Roz. But guess what? It works. They have 0 secrets, minimal tension, and they actually solve their problems. This is where public policy could learn a thing or two. Instead of skirting around difficult topics like the future of farming in the face of climate change, how about we go full Roz and Bernie on it? Let's talk it out, and I mean really talk it out. Have those uncomfortable conversations and about land use, trade agreements, and environmental impact, and worse, who needs to pay for it all? Sure, it might make us squirm a little, but that's better than pretending the issues aren't there. Which brings me to my fourth point, the consequence of silence, when small issues snowball. One of my favourite moments in the movie is when Greg tries to cover up the fact that he lost Jack's favourite cat, Mr. Jinx, and then goes to extraordinary lengths to find it. This leads Greg to having a light bulb idea of spray painting a stray cat in a useless attempt to fool his father-in-law. Instead of simply owning up to his mistakes, Greg remains silent. The entire family end up in a ridiculous, escalating battle over the missing cat, which not only creates trust issues, but also causes a walkout and Greg's wife questioning her choice in soulmate. Everything essentially blows up. In AD, we've seen this kind of snowballing before, like with the trade wars. Instead of engaging in meaningful dialogue early, the silence ends up making things worse, and suddenly we've lost key markets for wine and barley. The longer we wait, the bigger the problem grows, until we're not just dealing with one cat incident, we're dealing with a full-blown crisis. So let's save ourselves and start talking about our problems before we have to resort to cat wrangling. My final point is that talking isn't always comfortable, but it's better than the alternative. Just ask Greg when he's stuck explaining the teenage nanny fling to his in-laws and his wife Pam. As cringeworthy as this conversation, it's nothing compared to the explosion that happens when things are left unsaid. If Greg had just mentioned the fling to Pam, they could have avoided the scandal altogether and avoided Jack going all CIA on Greg to prove the paternity of the nanny's son. Instead, his avoidance leads him to a family scandal bigger than Barnaby Joyce's love life. It's the same with putting policy into actions. Talking about tough issues in agriculture, whether it's animal welfare, trade, climate, or biosecurity, might feel uncomfortable, like confessing to an awkward teenage fling. But avoiding these conversations, well, that's how we end up with a full-scale public relations nightmare, or worse, farmers left stranding without the support that they need. So, ladies and gentlemen, what have we learnt from Meet the Fockers? Whether you're a paranoid ex-CIA agent, a neurotic male nurse, or an oversharing, over-communicating hippie couple, the answer is clear. When you don't talk about the problems, things get worse. Whether it's family secrets or agricultural policy, the solution is simple. Talk about it. In fact, we need to talk more, not less. Conversations, more openness, and more of that good old Focker-style honesty. So, esteemed leaders, let's make a pact to keep the circle of trust strong in our industry. Because if we don't start talking about the problems now, we'll end up cleaning up the ashes of more than just our grandmother's urn. Thank you, and good luck keeping your circles of trust in check.
Well, wasn't that a whirlwind? Clearly we all need a day off work to sleep on the couch, catch up on some popular culture movies, and lean into weighted blankets while eating our bananas. What a great, a great series of debates. And you guys on this side, well, the blistering presentation here by our friend Catherine left everyone in this room absolutely fearful of getting on the wrong side of the debate. And thank you very much, J-Dog, you did us proud. So now I think on reflection, we're just going to take a quick moment and hear from our wonderful debaters. First of all, give them all a round of applause. You've provided some entertainment, you've woken us all up, and I guess now what I'm really keen to hear from you guys is getting this balance right. Do we talk too much in agriculture? You know, drop your personas of your debate, but really, what's your perspectives on this? Who wants to go first? Come on, Kade, you're looking at me.
Me, okay. I think that talking is important, with some caveats to that. I believe that there is a lot of value in working out what the genuine heart of a problem is and making sure that we define problems within solvable solutions. It's very easy to cascade problems and say that a solution to one problem has a problem, so therefore you can't solve that solution. I think where we get into trouble is by not recognizing that we talk because we don't want to deal with the solution, or we don't like the best solution, and so instead of grappling with why we don't like it or how we can make that work for us, we just keep talking and go from best sort of the best solution, best practice policy, down to sort of third, fourth, fifth best.
So do we need to spend more time on process, Jen? What's your view?
I could come at this from a million different angles, and everyone knows I like to talk. So I think this might be a surprise for people. I think we do talk about things too much, and we look for the perfect response and the best perfect process. And I think from my perspective, sometimes the unwillingness to fail holds us back as a sector. And I think sometimes the unwillingness, and I'll go back to the meet the Fockers, unwillingness to tackle some really tricky subjects holds us back. So we end up talking about them without the doing. So look, I definitely think process is part of it, and I think sometimes, well, we talked about the 300 or 400 groups we have in agriculture, whatever it might have been, I can't remember the exact number, and I just think, do we need that level of representation? Because I just wonder who's actually talking to the people they're representing. I don't always see, as a farmer, I don't always see farmers in the room when I'm there, and I don't know that the processes necessarily always allow that. Now that's a generalised comment. You could make that across a whole range of things. But I definitely think that we talk too much about problems. I'm into fast failing and learning.
Maz, what's your perspective?
I think you need a bit of both. And I think talking about the problem is really, really important with the right people in the room. And I'm going to throw a challenge out to agriculture, and I don't think it's specific to agriculture, but we've got a list of token humans, we get involved in everything. And how much knowledge, wisdom and experience are we missing out on having different people at these conversations that are going to influence change? So my challenge to all of you is, if you're running an event, if you're forming a committee, I want you to put at least 2 people on that committee, so they don't have the balance of power, but they can get experience, or 2 people on your conference speaking panel that aren't well known. Because I think we go to the same people that give us the same answers and we get the same results. So we need to talk about it. We need to have diverse opinions in the audience, in the gang, and we also need to have really clear purpose and defined outcomes, because we don't want to get falling into that trap of talking for talking's sake and forming another bloody committee just to tick a box. Like that drives me bonkers. But I do think we need to talk about it, so I was a bit the opposite of what I was saying.
And Justin, a question for you. We've heard today the role or the potential of AI in a regenerative sense to help guide policy in very controversial questions put to our essay finalists. Do you have a view on that in terms of how talking can be integrated with AI? Is it going to replace this policy process that we have today?
Yeah, I mean, I thought long and hard about this topic when I was given it, and I think that the amount of issues that we all deal with and the amount of talking that we engage in is unfortunately a consequence of just the modern life now. I mean, I think there's a lot more issues that we worry about now that we didn't 20 years ago when the AFI was first formed. And we are saturated with an enormous amount of information that I'm not sure each one of us individually could process, and that's why we have so much more talking and conversation that takes place without as much action. Despite what I was performing up there, I believe it in a sense, but at the same time, if AI were involved to an extent to help us process this saturation of information, that would be a really nice boost, I think, to what this sector can get done and what this policy committee or community can achieve with our existing platforms that we have.
So Jen, that's why we need reliable internet in regional Australia. Do you care to comment on the future of AI and where you see this integrating with our policy structures that we have in place?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting question, and I think there's, everyone's got a view, I think. I'm probably on the side where I like technology. I like when things change and allow us to do different things, and I don't think we've got a really great handle on what that potential looks like. And just hearing, I do run the Regional Tech Hub, and I've been in conversations with Telstra and Cathy McGowan. Shout out to Cathy, got a group together to talk about AI and what the potential is. Conversations are happening, but I definitely am on the side of let's see what these types of technologies can do for us. And certainly connectivity is no there's no gap for that. There's definitely AI's potential there, but also just on our farm, in everything we're doing, there is definitely potential for it. One of the things, though, I'd like to say with this talking concept is that the conversation I think what we tend to do in ag is we then start talking about ourselves and we talk about it in our own context. And I think let's just grab AI because it's a new concept. Let's stop looking at it from an ag-specific context. Let's see how we can look at it from how health and education. We heard Robin talk before, there is no health person in this room. So how can we actually link in with other sectors and other things that are going on? And let's grab this one example because it's new and it's something we can think about. And let's not only put an ag lens on it, let's see how we can start the conversation with all the other sectors, either whether that's in Australia or internationally, and start to think about what does that really mean and lean on other people's experience. And not only that, there's some really smart people out there that maybe don't say, I can't wait to get up and get into agriculture, but I really like AI. Let's drag those in and start to think about how we might bring some of that learning and lessons into agriculture.
Maz?
I think, Jen, you raise a really good point, and it has sort of triggered something in me, which is I think we in agriculture talk to ourselves and we enjoy comfortable conversations. We talk to people that think like us. And when I was involved in the live export industry, I deliberately reached out to Stop Live Exports, Animals Australia, RSPCA, people that were hating on us, because people like people and people will work with people they like. So if you can build a relationship, it's far more functional than shouting and ranting and ignoring them, because ignore them at your peril, right? They've got a voice and it's increasing. So I think it's important that we identify not people that make us comfortable, but people that make us uncomfortable, and step into that space and have those conversations. And don't only have those conversations from a perspective of I need to win, have those conversations from an ears on, mouth off for a minute, and actually try and listen to yield some empathy, because that in turn will then help you form a strategy to beat them. No, just joking. But it's it's important that we listen to and engage with people that we don't traditionally do so. And with the communication landscape, which has gone from mass communication through news media to masses of communicators, there's plenty more people that have influence over our sector than traditionally has been the case.
No, that's an excellent point. At this stage, if there are any questions from the floor, I'm happy to facilitate that. But otherwise, I think it's a brilliant way to finish, which is that we've got to get the balance right between talking and listening. And I think today is very much a coming together, some debating of ideas, but more importantly, the exchange and that human connection. We heard today about the importance of the S in the ESG, and I think that really is the opportunity for face-to-face networking at events such as this. And hopefully out of our session today hasn't just been a bit of fun, but also opened up some perspectives that you might have overlooked or potentially hadn't thought about before. So we've heard about the importance of keeping that open mind. I think our panel have demonstrated the power of curiosity and to be able to lean into issues and to consider other perspectives. So, ladies and gentlemen, please thank me. Oh, you've got a question. Katie, I thought, was winding me up.
No, quite the opposite. I was going to say, I've got a question, and also there's a few coming through on Slido. So if you haven't, I'm not sure if Caroline's got her phone, she's probably done the right thing and put it down. If you put a question in Slido, wave your hand and we'll give you the microphone as well. So one of my questions actually just already got answered, so I have to skip ahead to the next one. Do we need consensus in order to take action? This is something we tend to do in agriculture. We say we need to get everyone's voices, we need to engage, we need everyone in the room. Is consensus necessary? What does the panel think?
I think if you're sitting in a room where everybody agrees with you, you're in the wrong room, to be frank. I think you're going to get a much better solution with divergent views. And you've got to create, as a leader, you've got to create a safe space so everyone feels safe being heard. You then need a mechanism to make a decision, right? But I think if everybody's agreeing with you in the room, it's a dangerous space to be in. And I think that's one of the challenges ag faces, is we're busy talking to ourselves where everybody agrees with us.
If I could add to that, there's a saying that you're only as happy as your parent. You're the only as happy as you're the least happiest child. So I guess if I take that analogy and think that if nobody's losing too badly, and that generally we can say that, I just don't know that consensus, is possible. I'm the president of the New South Wales Yes branch, and looking around that room, you're just not going to get consensus on a whole range of issues. So I kind of look at it and think to myself, well, if nobody's really, really badly off, is that good enough? And I think at some points, and look, it's horses for courses, of course. Horses of courses, of course. I think you know what I mean. But we're not doing the debate anymore.
I was going to say, you're doing the dance now?
I think at the end of the day, that's a really good place to sort of land. And I think, if everyone can walk away getting something that's positive, but there's just so many issues where consensus is not going to be achievable. And I think, to be honest, it can be the opposite of progress if that's where you end up coming back to.
Anyone else waving at you, Caroline?
Oh, yes, we do. We've got a bidder at the back of the room. On Slido. So I haven't got my glasses.
Listen, thanks. Robert Pekin from the Food Connect Foundation up in Brisbane. Thanks so much for the debate. That was really enjoyable, but also you touched on some really important topics. I think the Fokker example of not saying anything until it's too late is a really classic example. But I'm wondering in the policy side of things, because we are seeing a convergence of collapsing crises all at once, and policy certainly isn't staying up to date. In accounting, we went from a P&L or a forecast P&L and a balance sheet, and then we started to do cash flow forecasting, and now we do rolling cash flow forecasting on a monthly or a quarterly basis. Is there an appetite in the policy side of things to actually go to rolling policy, where we are having where someone in the previous example cited, where you do all this research, you do all this work, and then finally the policy is launched, and by that time it's redundant? Is there a chance to accelerate that process where it is a conversation, as you were talking about, Catherine? It's a rolling conversation. People who aren't normally in the room are there, particularly the people on the ground doing the real innovative work.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And Catherine, you listed off a list of really complex policy issues that may never be officially solved. Is that part of the problem, that we're always looking to round something off? Or so do you want to comment on that concept of a rolling policy dialogue?
Yeah, I'll just speak really briefly because I'm actually interested in hearing what the actual policy people think. But I think, in life we like to put things in a box, finish it and move on. But the nature of the speed of life and the speed of change means that we need to stay contemporary. And so I think we need to be flexible. We need to have a goal in mind, but be flexible with sort of how we get there, would be my thoughts. But I'd really like to hear from Justin and Kane.
I think there's a couple of things in that story that that you can look at that would move us towards that. I think the number one thing is risk and people's risk appetite. And I think when we look at the policy landscape and how we make policy decisions, often there's an expectation that it is government who is doing it, and it is a policy that government will develop and implement and be responsible for. And that's fine. You can do that. The thing is, government have a very, very low risk tolerance, and they don't want to put in any policy that upsets people. And so the way that they can minimise that risk is by doing research and testing and doing stakeholder surveys. And that because the idea is that at the end of it, you're like, oh, we went through this whole process and we have a perfect policy solution that everyone is happy with. That takes time. So that is why it is on us as people who develop policy, can implement policy within the private sector, to say we're happy to get things wrong, we're happy for it to increase our risk tolerance, and we can act with less information. And if we get it wrong, that's fine, but we've moved it and we've learned around what doesn't work, and so we can cut that option out, and we've got fewer options that we can move forward on. The second thing I think is that sometimes we make things more complicated than they need to be, and when things become complicated, it takes longer to get to the end because we have to explain ourselves and we have to bring people along in the journey, and that takes time. Whereas if we reflected on what are some of the fundamentals, what are some of the basics that we need to do, that research is already done. We're building on a really solid base that has happened over the last 100 years. I think a recurring theme of today is that we keep talking about the same issues, and there's going to be little updates, but the fundamentals are probably the same. look back at that research, make a call on that, and then go forward, and that will speed up the process a lot more as well.
Yeah, and just to add on, I guess I agree 100% with what Kade was saying, and I think there's also a role, an expanded role for our advocacy institutions to provide the type of thought leadership that perhaps independent or other institutions provide at the moment in a way that's really additive to what the government is already doing with trying to keep, I guess, an eye on that North Star, that a better agricultural sector is part of a better society, not just for ourselves, but for everyone else.
Can I just, sorry, just 2 seconds, jump in really quickly there. Can I be quite a little bit controversial? I don't think it's possible. I think we need burning platforms. If you look at things like drought and other things, it's amazing how we can talk about it along, and I'm not saying in every case, but if there's a lot of cases where I think the burning platform is where the real policy gains are made quite quickly. Not for every case, and it's really important to keep having these conversations, but it's amazing how directive people can suddenly get when they're staring down a challenge or a platform that they may not have if they don't do something.
And we've got one last question at the back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was an interesting discussion, and my question is differentiating between leadership, a knee-jerk reaction, and the doubling down when there's unforeseen consequences. And I'd probably just draw the example of live exports to Indonesia for cattle.
Was there a question in that?
Yeah. The differences between when it's leadership and a knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah, okay. So I think leadership by definition needs to be proactive, right? So you are fundamentally leading a group of people and you have a responsibility to be forward-facing and visionary and making sure that actions are then put in place to follow up and mitigate whatever it is that risk is portraying. I know a little, like I'm fairly familiar with this particular example, and I'm really happy to have a chat with you offline. There's some things that I'm probably aware of. I don't really need the whole room to be aware of. But go on, pin your ears back, Marriott. No. So, I think knee-jerk reactions, by definition, are reactive. They're costly, they're rigid, they're bureaucratic, and you get told how to do things. That's not in anybody's favour. Leadership, you can be proactive, flexible, innovative. So they are diametrically opposed, and I think it's really important that as a sector, we are really trying to de-risk ourselves by being proactive, future-looking, looking not only at our own business and our industry in Australia, but globally, because there's lead indicators everywhere around what are the next challenges. I have just spent 12 months travelling the world looking at ESG policy, which has totally changed my thinking on the whole thing. I thought that was going to be a massive burning platform. I think food security, the inconvenient truth of food security will mitigate some of that in the short term. Again, ignore the signs at your peril. But I think, leadership is about being proactive. Knee-jerk reaction is a result of a lack of leadership, and it puts people in a really difficult situation.
Excellent.
Sorry, just to jump in there, Caroline. I think there's something to be careful, though, that we should be cognizant of an industry that you can have situations where someone's leader is another person's ideologue, and there are situations where what you see as a reactive action is someone else's bold leadership and being decisive in decision making, and being clear around why you think that is and why we think something is a decision of leadership versus sort of a knee-jerk reaction or acting on ideology, and sort of being clear around what the principles we make those decisions on are will help us be more cohesive and clearer in our response and our sort of defence or addressing that situation. I think that's an important thing to keep in the back of our minds as we have those conversations as well.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we have run out of time because now, after that energy burst that we've all had, we've got to get to work and do a masterclass. So I think what we've demonstrated that the proposition is talking about the problem overrated, clearly, given the extension and the ongoing debate that's occurred on this table, I think demonstrates that the old adage, it depends, applies, and we are solutions oriented, but we need to keep talking And I think we've had some leadership in action. We've just discussed, you know, the role of leadership, and I'd like to ask you to help me thank the 4 leaders here on the panel today. Thanks, guys. That was a lot of fun.